difficulties. We are actually doing our Zoom meeting live tonight through YouTube. So, everybody on YouTube, welcome, welcome. And tonight we're going to be discussing the laws of Chometz. Now, what is Chometz? What are we supposed to be doing with it? How do we get rid of it? And first of all, that is answering the question of should we be getting rid of it? And the answer is yes, we should be. At least for Pesach, Passover. So, tonight we're going to be discussing its laws and some practical applications of those laws. And we're going to try to keep it under half an hour. Now, my original intention was to discuss the laws of Chometz and the laws of how we're supposed to be koshering our kitchens. This was the original intention for the Zoom class, but because that was canceled, we're actually going to be, B'ezras Hashem, splitting it up into two different videos. I think that would be better. So let's begin. First of all, what even is chametz, and what are we supposed to be doing with it? Well, chametz is grain that has contacted liquid, primarily water, for longer than 18 minutes. And I think, according to some authorities, it's also, to be stricter, they even say 15 minutes. Now, that is not the majority. That is not the view that most people go by. Now, the vast majority say 18 minutes, and so this is how we observe. If your matzah has been made in over 18 minutes, it is not kosher Pesach, unfortunately. Very sorry. So make sure to check your boxes of matzah. It should say kosher Pesach or kosher for Passover on it. And if it doesn't, then we actually can't use that during Passover. Now, Ashkenazim, that is the Jews of Europe, we have a custom of not eating kitnios. Now, what are kitnios? They are basically legumes. They include beans, lentils, peanuts, because peanuts are technically a legume or bean. And Ashkenazim also do not eat rice or corn. Now, a small minority of Sephardim, they will also not eat kitnios. And this is because of the Ashkenazi Haredi influence on the Sephardic world. Now, in fact, there are many Sephardim who, in the land of Israel, will actually attend Ashkenazi yeshivot, or yeshivos, and they have adopted this custom. So it's a meritorious custom. However, for Sephardim, you do not have to do this. Now, for those of you who will be eating rice during the holiday, all of my Sephardi friends, remember to check your rice thoroughly. Make sure that there are no little bits of wheat chaff or of wheat itself or of any grains in your rice. And as long as your rice is good, then it is good to go for Pesach. That rice is kosher Pesach for you guys. So just make sure to check your rice. Now, what exactly is chametz? As we said, it's grain that has contacted liquid or moisture for 18 minutes, longer than 18 minutes. And so, what are some of the products that we are concerned with? Well, the main thing is bread, because the bread has contacted moisture and liquid for longer than 18 minutes. It's almost guaranteed. Excuse me. And so, other things that we're concerned about are pasta, cereals, beer. There's many sauces even that have chametz in it. And so I was actually just looking through my fridge the other day and it said that it contained wheat. Or there's some products that say was made in a facility that processed wheat. Or it'll say may contain trace amounts of wheat. Now, all of these things we want to be careful of and watchful of. So basically, if it even says wheat on the package, it is probably not kosher Pesach, unfortunately. So, what are we supposed to be doing with all this Pesach, with all this Pesach, with all of this chametz? Well, there is the biblical commandment to be getting rid of the chametz for Pesach, and so often we have the practice of eating it all up before the holiday. We can also destroy it. We can burn it. We can douse it with chemicals and pour some Clorox bleach over it. And if we have large amounts of chametz, we just have too many baguettes lying around the house, then what we can do is that we can sell this bread or sell whatever kind of chametz it is to a non-Jew. They'll buy it and then they'll sell it back to us for a little bit of a profit for them, because they do need to be reimbursed for their time and the energy that they took to help us out. They'll sell it back to us. So let's say we sell them $15 worth of baguettes, then they'll sell it back to us for, say, 16, 17, 20. Now, whatever price they set is the fair price because this is business. If they say 20, then it's 20. If they say 30, then it's 30. Now, if they set the price too high and you just don't want to buy it back, well, then you're out of your chametz. They have no obligation to sell it to you, and you have no obligation to buy it from them. However, it is common practice that you do always buy your chametz back. So, next, after we have cleaned out all the chametz, first of all, how are we supposed to be cleaning for the chametz? Because as we know, we're supposed to be cleaning out our houses for chametz. We're supposed to be cleaning out our house. I'm about to say it again. Our houses of chametz. There we go. Don't even try to say that 5 times fast. So what exactly are we doing? Are we just going around the house looking for all of those baguettes that are lying around? No. Well, we are doing that. But it's a little bit more detailed than that, but probably not as detailed as you might have heard. So here is the basic halacha. Go around your house, and we're looking for pieces of chametz, that is any kind of grain, usually in the form of bread or pasta or cereal, but also beer, but you can't pick up little bits of beer. You won't have beer crumbs lying around the house. But we're looking for chametz that is the size of a kazayas. Now, how much is that? Well, it's the size of a small olive. That's a very scientific amount. And so, what is that going to look like? Well, for me, it'll be roughly the size of my thumbnail. So, if it's right on the borderline of being roughly the size of my thumbnail, then to be safe, to be stringent, then we would throw that out. We would get rid of it. Or we would destroy it, or we would sell it. But nobody's going to buy that such small amount. Throw that away. Sweep it up and throw it away. Now, anything smaller than that size is technically not halakhically mandated to be gotten rid of. Now, any sane person, if they're going to see a little bit of chametz, they're just going to sweep it up with the rest of the floor. So if you're sweeping the floor and you see little crumbs of cereal or bread or something, just sweep it up. It's very simple. And in fact, if you hadn't known any better, you'd probably do it anyway. So we should not necessarily go out of our way to avoid those pieces because there's no point. We're making our lives harder if we do that. So actually, by doing the stringent thing, which is by getting the pieces that are smaller than a little baby olive, we're actually being stricter, but we're also doing things that are more practical and that are easier for us to do. So it's a win-win. Keeping the Torah is always a win-win, but this is a win-win in the sense that it's convenient. So not only are we sweeping floors, but we are also looking in couch cushions. We're also looking under desks, like the one that I'm currently sitting at. We're not necessarily looking at bookshelves, although if you have a tendency to eat when you study, it could be a good idea just to take out the books and clean behind there anyway. Also, just for the sake of having beautiful bookshelves, dust them off real quick. That's all that you have to do. If anything at all. I mean, if you don't tend to eat and study at the same time, you do not have any obligation to be checking for chametz there. Now, where else are we checking? We're also checking in bedrooms because throughout the year, people tend to bring food in there. And especially if you have children, they're going to be eating in the bedrooms, whether you know it or not, whether we like it or not, because kids like to sneak food. I did when I was a kid. My kids did. It happens. So it's important to check underneath beds, check in the blankets, check next to pillows, check in toy boxes. We're looking everywhere for this hametz. It is a serious search and destroy mission. So we can throw all of this away, or we can save it so that we can burn it later. It's up to you. Or it's up to Facebook, which just sent me to work. So, and Mark Zuckerberg's Jewish, but he can't for now tell us what to do with this chametz. You got this, Zuckerberg? So, we're checking our houses, we're checking our kitchens, living rooms. It's probably worthwhile to check in closets again, especially if you have children. Checking bedrooms. Also, it's going to be gross, but also the bathrooms. You don't have to check in the toilet because all the chametz that is in there is already nullified, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's a good idea to clean your toilets. But check behind, check on shelves, check next to sinks, bathtubs. This should be very easy because bathrooms tend to be small. It should only take us maybe 5 or 10 minutes to check. If there's clearly nothing there, you can move on. Now, again, part of preparing for Passover is doing spring cleaning. This is actually where the custom of spring cleaning comes from, is from cleaning for Passover. So it's not a bad idea to get in the cleaning spirit and clean your house as you are looking for your chametz. So finally, another place that we often forget about is our cars, our vehicles. So a lot of times we'll be grabbing snacks on the go, or if you're like me and you run a business, I'm a painter personally. And so as I'm going from site to site, of course, I've got to stop by the dollar store and get some snacks. And those wrappers get thrown on the floor. You'll find crumbs. You'll find half eaten. What kind of kid is going to leave an Oreo? I don't know, but you might find a half eaten Oreo underneath that back passenger seat. So it's important to check underneath the seats and to vacuum that car out thoroughly. We want to get all the crumbs out that we can. Now, for places that we cannot physically reach, later on we're going to be nullifying all of the chametz in our possession, on our property, everywhere. So it's important to remember that we don't have to stress out that if we physically cannot reach it, then bleach it. Just kidding. In the kitchen we can do that, but don't do that in your car. It's gonna end up like mine and have little paint spots all over it. You don't want your car to be in bad shape. You want it to be in good shape. That's why we're cleaning it, and to get the and to get the chametz out. So clean out our cars real nice. Now, one of the last things we want to do is also check our jacket pockets, our pant pockets, all of our clothes, especially kids, along with things like lunch boxes, because food always gets left in there. And when it comes time for July, we're used to it. That last lunch got left, and now it's moldy. So we want to make sure that we're cleaning out everywhere food touches, every place that food goes, every place that a little squirrel could carry food to, because our beloved little squirrels, our children, take food everywhere. So we want to make sure that if a little squirrel could take it there, it's very likely that our kids could take it there as well. So, on the night of the 14th of Nisan, this is when we begin our ceremonial search for chametz. And when we are searching for chametz, what we do is that we take a candle, preferably a wax candle, and we go around the house and we search one last time for any chametz. And whatever chametz we find, it's customary that we take a feather and we just kind of sweep it up onto a plate, and then we either again throw it away or save it to be burned. Now, sometimes people will ask, what kind of candles can we use? Now, for those of you who do light Shabbos candles, these candles can be used for searching for comets. Now, here is a common practice that is not mandatory, but it's a good practice, and it's also something that I personally enjoy, which is sometimes parents will hide large pieces of hametz wrapped in tinfoil because we don't want them, we just got done cleaning for a week or longer in some cases. So we don't want those little crumbs to get into the carpet, to get under the beds, to get anywhere. We don't want to attract bugs either. So we'll take the hametz, we'll wrap it up in some tinfoil where it's safe. Maybe even some plastic wrap and then tinfoil if you really want to. So we'll take these pieces and we'll hide them around the house. And what will we do? We'll send the kids, because the kids are going to be great for this. And it'll be tons of fun as well, watching them, but also for them to go on this mad dash around the house, trying to find these pieces of hametz. And assuming that they're responsible and that they're not going to light anything on fire, then it's also very fun for them to be able to hold the candle and to look everywhere for the hametz. Now, if they're a little questionable, you don't know if you can quite rely on them to be safe with it, it is also a good idea to follow them around. And if they think that that's weird or if they don't like that, then make it fun. Add it to the game. So that's just one good idea and good practice that we do. Now, Kabbalistically or mystically, some people will hide 10 pieces for, again, very deep spiritual reasons. During the search, if I haven't mentioned it already, during the search, we are not to talk at all. Now, again, this adds intrigue to the game, but also it reminds us to keep our minds focused on the task at hand. And so while we're searching for the hametz, everybody's got to be mum is the word. And so, again, even for the kids, and this is for the grown-ups as well, we are not to speak. Now, for the kids, this can add an extra dimension of intrigue, of fun to the game, because it's almost like the silent game or the quiet game. I think every parent at this point has played the quiet game. And so while you're searching in the dark with a candle, being quiet, and you're trying to find this hametz, it really does turn it into quite the game. And it makes it into a very fun and memorable experience for everybody. So after we have found all 10 or so pieces of hametz laying around the house, as I said previously, then what we'll do is that we will nullify all of these pieces of hametz in our hearts. So we'll say this hametz is ownerless, we don't want it anymore, it no longer belongs to us, and we are totally disposing of it. We have no more emotional attachment, we are relinquishing all property rights to this hametz. And this must be done with a verbal declaration. Now, what's the reason behind this? It's so that everybody knows that the hametz has been nullified. If you nullify the hametz and say it's ownerless, and then somebody comes and eats it, it creates for a problematic situation. So make sure we get everybody in the house, maybe gather around in a circle and say, I nullify all the hametz, and make it very clear to everybody. Now, this nullification of the hametz should also be done in the morning, the next day. So we're doing this search on the night of the 14th, and as we know, Jewish days begin in the evening, at night, at sundown, and they go until the next sundown. So the evening of the 14th is actually the beginning, and then the morning is when we wake up and it's still the 14th. Imagine that. So it's still the 14th. In the morning of the 14th, what we're going to be doing is, again, nullifying all the hametz. The first time worked perfectly fine, but we're doing it again almost just to rub it in, to be very emphatic about this. We don't want the hametz, for crying out loud. So we're doing this one last time, again, just to make sure. You never really know. Maybe a squirrel brought one of those Hawaiian rolls from the neighbor's house and dropped it off in your driveway. You never know. Those sneaky squirrels. So what we're going to say is, may all chametz and products containing chametz that exist in my property, that I have seen and that I have not seen, that I know about and that I do not know about, be nullified and be considered like the dust of the earth. And this renders all chametz ownerless and inedible from that moment on, and no one is permitted to eat it or benefit from it. Now, this also includes dog food. This can be a tricky one for people with pets. Pet food is often made from grains, so either from wheat, corn, or something of that variety. And so it's important that, unfortunately, even for Fido, we have to get rid of all this food. So maybe now, a few weeks before Pesach, give him another little scoop if he wants, assuming it's healthy and the vet would support that. But to help you get rid of his food so that you're not wasting any. Now, when we do sell our chametz, what we can do is also include the dog food, because dog food can be kind of pricey, especially if you get those giant bags that are half my height and over 6 feet. And some of these bags are enormous, and so usually the bigger the bag, the more expensive as well. Um, Even if you do benefit from that price quantity discount. So now, for those of you who will be using a machzor, this is what the machzor looks like. Interestingly enough, the one for Pesach is actually the largest one. And I've always found that a little bit curious. You'd think that maybe the one for Yom Kippur, the one where we're using it to pray to Hashem to forgive our sins, would be the biggest. It's actually not. But because the laws of Pesach are so in depth and they require so much attention, that's probably why this one's the largest. Now, as I almost said did mention, as I did not mention earlier, there are some things that we say before our search on the night of the 14th for comments. And I didn't read everything that we would read. One, because I don't want to be saying a bracha in vain, but also because you can look it up online, probably on Chabad.org, I would assume. But also you can find this information in the Moksar. And so I had a note that I did not pay attention to. And in this Moksar, it says the search for Chometz 11. This goes from page 3, page 4 is in Hebrew, and then page 5. And I'm listing the English pages for you. And so this basically, what this tells us is that we're saying brachas and we're making declarations about our search for chametz with the eventual intention of destroying it. And so this will probably be backwards for you, but this is what it looks like. Let's see if maybe we can get a better view. So I did forget to mention that earlier. I do apologize. Now again, for those of you who are using the Moksar, now what is a Moksar, first of all? It's basically the prayer book for holidays. So normally we'd be using a Siddur or Siddur, and that is the typical weekday and Shabbos prayer book that we use. The Maksorim are special ones. So the morning that we wake up after our search for chametz, we'll wake up and we will gather all of our chametz that we found, that we have left, and we'll take it outside, and if we're not selling it, and if we haven't eaten it already, then we're going to be burning it. We're going to be destroying the chametz with fire. What that was, I don't know. But we're going to be destroying it in fire. Now, there are other ways of doing this, such as pouring bleach all over it, making it totally chemically inedible. But burning the chametz is considered a superior way of doing it. And so, as unfortunately we're probably not going to be able to see because it'll be backwards, but burning the chametz, as we see, we have more of these beautiful, tasty things in the machzor that tell us exactly what to say. So we are nullifying the chametz, and we are, let's see. Yes, and then in this machzor, at least, it has a little meditation at the end. So it's not very long. As you can see, it is not even one page. What we see right here, this is it. And even this half, is totally optional. So if you don't like reading, if you don't like using the Siddur or the machzor, then you don't even have to do the bottom. As it says, some recite the following supplication at this point. So, if your mouth gets dried out, if your attention is waning, it's good to pay attention to the optional things and see which ones are optional. Now, let's see. Now, something else that we're going to be getting into, B'ezras Hashem at another time, is the laws of Erev Tafshilin, which is about creating an Erev for your home so that you can cook during Yom Tov. We're not going to be getting into that yet, but for future reference, there is a tiny little passage in the machzor for us. And so the reason why these prayer books are called Sidurim, so Sidurim, is because they give us the Seder, they give us the order. They lay everything out very beautifully, very neatly for us. And so if it doesn't say it, don't do it. If it does say it, then do it. It guides us along very beautifully. So it will guide it. It's basically a step-by-step guide in how to pray and how to do various ritual things. So if you don't know how to observe Passover, except for the Seder nights, this will basically tell us everything that we need to know. For the Seder night, you'll want to get a Haggadah, which again is something that we'll be discussing B'ezras Hashem at a later time. Let's see. Now, what happens if you find chametz in your house during the week of anti-chametz, during the week of matzah, the week of Pesach? What do? We forgot one of those baguettes in the basement. So, what do we do with the baguette? We just get rid of it. There's nothing special that you have to do. Because of your verbal declaration that all of the chametz in your house has been nullified, all we do is just get rid of that basement baguette. So, because at this point it technically does not belong to anybody, it does not belong to you, because you relinquished your ownership of it, and you declared it inedible, so nobody can eat it, so you can't give it to somebody to eat. It is entirely dirt. It is a pile of dirt. As we said earlier, may it be as the dust of the earth. So, what are we doing with this basement baguette? Well, we're throwing it away. Or, if you would like, you can also burn it, which again is considered a superior way, but is not the only way. Let's see. Now, one final thing that I'd like to talk about regarding the destruction of chametz I have a note saying that Hasidim recite all biur hametz, which is the bracha of destroying hametz. It's when we're burning the hametz, we say the bracha, and they just let's see. They will say the bracha over any size of chametz that's destroyed. Now, many will only say a bracha if it is larger than that little baby olive size. And if it's smaller, by the way, little baby olives are not a particular species. I'm talking about just small olives. Not those huge ones that are almost the size of a date. We're talking about on the smaller end. The reason being is because this is how olives were in ancient times, and because of genetic modification, today's olives are a bit larger than what they used to be. So we go according to the little baby olives. So usually we'd only say a bracha over chometz that is that size or larger. But many Hasidim will say the bracha for when we're destroying chametz over any size of chametz that is destroyed. And this is according to the Shulchan Aruch Harav 446 1. By the way, the Mishnah Berurah in 435 5 says to recite a bracha if it is larger than a kazayas. So, again, you can see that there's a little bit of a debate on this. So, whichever is your custom, go according to your custom. Another important thing that I'd like to touch on is what if you have food that was cooked in a chametz stick pot? Now, what does chametz stick mean? It's like a chametzy pot. It's a chametz-ish pot. It's basically a pot that has been, in a sense, tainted by chametz. So it's become chametz stick. Just as, if you cook dairy in a pot, it becomes a dairy pot. If you cook meat in a frying pan, let's say, it becomes a meaty frying pan, or a fleischig pan, as we'd say. Then if something is chametz stick, then it means it's a chametzy pot. And what does that mean? It means if you cooked chametz in that pot, or that pan, or that skillet, or that rice cooker, or microwave, or whatever, then it becomes chametz stick. It becomes leaveny, becomes bready, doughy, in a sense. Um, Now, if you cooked, let's say, some broccoli and uh, in a skillet that was chametz stick, in a skillet that was used to cook grains at any point in the past year, then you can keep this food. It's not considered chametz itself. However, we'll save that until after Passover, and we just won't eat it during the holiday. So it is an important thing to note. You do not have to throw this food away, but we also cannot eat it during the Chag, during the holiday. Another important thing, especially if you're into doing crafts, is what about products such as glue or ink or anything like that that have chametz in it? And you'll be thinking, now, how did my baguette get into the glue? Well, again, if you have children, anything is possible. But we're not saying that the bread itself was used in the production of glue, but sometimes they will use uh, wheat or grains for to form the texture of the glue or of the ink or whatever it is. So, do we have to throw these things out, right? Because if you throw out all of your glue and all of your pens and all of your markers and everything, that could be a little pricey. Do we have to throw these things out? The answer is no, we do not. However, there is issues with, or there are issues with Play-Doh. Even though Play-Doh is entirely inedible, I mean, it's designed to be child friendly and child safe. Technically, you probably could eat it. You probably wouldn't die. Maybe you can. I don't know. Don't test that. Um, but for our purposes, for halakhic purposes, we're going to want to throw that Play-Doh away. So the few weeks before Passover, let's not buy any Play-Doh unless you're okay with throwing it out. Those little, 50-cent jars or dollar jars, that probably won't result in any significant financial loss. But it is important to know. There are also ways to, if your children love Play Doh, there are ways to make hametz free Play Doh. So you can look those recipes up online if you're interested. Um, Sometimes rice, corn, or potato flours, depending if you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi, uh, those flour alternatives can be used for making Play Doh. Now, regarding the topic of quinoa, which some of you might know it as quinoa, right? It's actually pronounced quinoa. And there's some debate as to whether quinoa is permitted during Pesach. And the problem is because it basically looks like a grain, but technically I think it's actually a flour. Like broccoli is technically a flour. So there are some Ashkenazim, as we'll typically find when we're studying halacha, some Ashkenazim forbid it. However, some Ashkenazim do permit it, and Sephardim will also permit it if it has a kosher for Passover label on it. So, and presumably, if you grow your own and you check it thoroughly, then I assume that it would also be fine. So, what are some of our main takeaways? First of all, understanding what even is chametz, or what chametz even is, I guess would be a more proper way of saying that. Hametz is basically any grain that has made any contact with water, juice, liquids, moisture, uh, moisturizer. Just kidding. So it had any contact with liquids. This also includes juice as well. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but it does include juice. So if it has made contact with a liquid for longer than 18 minutes, then it is considered chametz, which are perfectly tasty things. Those baguettes are mwah, lovely, they're magnifique, but not during Pesach. So during Pesach, we want to throw out all of these things. And to do that, first of all, we need to search and destroy it. We need to go on a search and destroy mission. And we have to look for all of the chametz in our house, in our couches, in our pockets, um, bathrooms, kids' rooms, toy boxes, cars, uh, jackets, jacket pockets, everywhere where crumbs can accumulate. So we'll also be wanting to check underneath couches, um, basically anywhere that food could be placed. And like I said earlier, if a squirrel could take it there, your children can probably also take it there. So, and then the last thing is that chametz stick utensils and vessels need to be koshered if you intend to use them during Passover. Now, in the original Zoom meeting, I was going to add this to the same video, but we're going to be making another video because I feel like this one has gone on quite long enough. So I hope you all are doing well, and I invite you to join us for our next video on koshering our dishes and utensils for Pesach. As I was getting ready for our Zoom, as I was getting ready for our Zoom video, I wanted to bring out my giant koshering pot. I feel like this pot is like that ship at the beginning of Star Wars. It just keeps going and going and going. Anyway, I hope you all are doing beautifully. You're doing magnificently. Uh, Seriously. So I hope you all are doing well, and we'll see you in the next video.